It's time for Inside Security. We're back with another episode. And I've got a really interesting guest with me tonight. This is episode number 10. And we're back on the blue team again. We're back to defending stuff. That's what I like. We're going to talk about how to defend and detect malicious events inside a company's network. So I figured I need an expert with me to be able to actually really talk about this. So I'm happy to have Navid from Vectra with me to talk about NDRs on this show. Welcome, Navid. Would you please introduce yourself to the viewers and listeners?
Thank you, Michael. I'm very interested to be part of this, and thanks for having me on your show. I've been looking at it. It's awesome that you're contributing to your knowledge and inviting for this talk. So yeah, a little bit about myself. So I work have been doing that for about 2 years, and I've been basically in the infrastructure space for a while now. I started my career first as a developer right after when I came out of university, and then having some contacts. Actually, I started my career at Cisco, and then from there moved myself into the software space, which was really much interesting. So at Cisco, I got a lot of kind of knowledge about how different products work and what is actually infrastructure, and then from there kind of moved myself into security. I've always liked security, but I mean here with what we're trying to achieve is actually little bit more understanding what the bad guy is doing, and understanding that helps us know how we can act based on things that happen, might be giving us some insights that we don't know. So I think it's something that gives a lot of value to, so that's why I'm doing it, at least.
It sounds good. It sounds like a really good background as well to have from Cisco and other infrastructure things to have in your backpack, basically. So what you're working with is an NDR, sorry. Then the question is, what is an NDR?
Yeah, so NDR is basically focusing on detection and response, but with a lens of looking at the network traffic. So that has been changing over time, but I think what it aims to solve, and this is a little bit why we are in this game, is that if you look at the technologies out at customers that I've been representing in the past, it has been around lots around prevention. So the prevention phase of not letting somebody come inside your network, which is not allowed, and performing things that is bad, basically. So there are different things like firewalls, IPSs, proxies, sandboxes. Now we have CASBs and all of that stuff. But still we see that, companies are exposed, and the network detection response is focused on the active phase of an attack. So once somebody is inside, how can we detect their activities? And this is the important part, surfacing that to the lens of the administrator versus being a SOC or a user of a product or this solution, what you need to prioritize. Because I think that is something that unfortunately from a capability standpoint has gone lost in the industry. So that is what we are solving, meaning prioritization and giving you the right information so you can actually, based on the information you have, take a good decision of to do a response that is required. So I would also say that it's kind of very much, NDR itself goes a lot broader. So it's not about your network from a company side, right? If you look at the traditional enterprise, not anymore the on-prem network. So these capabilities have to be there to bridge the on-prem with the cloud. The cloud is obviously infrastructure as a service. It's platform as a service. It is your kind of the DevOps that they talk about, even on-prem, SaaS services. So you need to bring this together. But we have found that at Vectra, the best way of doing is by using from day one machine learning and using different techniques to achieve this. So it's not about anomalies only. This is very important for how we approach this problem, not only focusing anomalies, but actually what is a attacker behavior, meaning sometimes we know that establishing command and control, we need to find out the best way of identifying that, and it can be a combination of what is actually the solution to that problem that we need to find. That is something that requires you to have a security research team that works with, they identify, break down the attack, and then you have a data science team that gives a solution to that problem. So you cannot use a hammer to the nail. You cannot use deep learning on everything, right? Because the problem is that you get lots of things that you need to cipher through as a result, which we want to prevent.
Yeah, I think we always come back to the same thing. Like, you need to have the right tool for the right job. So different tools has different uses. Okay, what about if you're a user of an NDR or like Vectra in this case, do you need to be like a senior IT security expert in order to actually use it? Or like what's the level of understanding on the user side of it, would you say?
Yeah, so in our side, we have taken an approach that, usually there is the second problem is that, we see lack of people at the level where you talk about. It's very hard to get the right level of understanding to go deep into, what is a RPC recon. It's very hard. It's very hard even to explain. So our approach is a little bit about, we need to make it easy enough to understand if you look at the SOC, you have the level 1, right, mm-hmm. where you have less kind of, they just need to understand what is going on. So build a basic understanding. And then you have the level 2, level 3. So the aim is to attract all of them and make them aware of what is going on and giving them the overview of what is going on. So for example, giving you some example, that one of the challenges I saw when I started at this side is it's very hard to grasp, what are the other things you need to know in order to be effective, right? You worked with GA3, GA3S hashes. Well, okay, where does that matter, right? In what phase and where? So the aim of what we do is to kind of break down the attack and look into identifying the different steps, surfacing that, and telling you these are the triggers, this is the business impact, this is what you need to do. So there is a comfort from the user perspective how I need to approach it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of compelling for, as I've seen in the 2 years, for everybody in this kind of security operations. Even not having a SOC, you have small. Our customers are, somebody who has 2 administrators, and then you want to get an idea what is going on and have a efficacy of, when to prioritize and what. And so you can do that as well. So
and that's really good. Yeah. So it should be quite easy to understand, even if you're not a super experienced security something. You can just still use it as an everyday admin of some sort. That's really good. So let's continue with setting some baseline. So because there's a lot of acronyms in our business. Like everything has like a 2 or 3 letter acronym, and everything just sounds the same. And I've had a few guests on who were talking about SOC and stuff, and then we were spoken about EDR, and I even said EDR in the beginning of the show. I corrected myself. So that's how easy it is to actually, just mix them up. So what's the difference between an EDR and what you're working with, an NDR, and like which product does what, basically?
Yeah, I think, I have a more, I'm leaning, of course, with the hat of NDR in my way of looking at it. But if I lift that hat off, it's basically, with an EDR, you need a software on an endpoint to look at what is bad behavior. And then depending on the company, they have different approaches on how you want to surface that. And the way I've seen it personally is that some of the ones that have been contributing to the kind of thinking that should be, easy way of grasping, you kind of build yourself into, okay, this happened, and then after this step this happened, etc., etc. But it's on the end point have to do with processes that contributing to something that could be a bad behavior. And of course you have the you have the client that needs to be installed. They can be kernel based, they can be in user space, depending on if the operating system is providing that itself, or if it's a external entity. And then you need to support different environments in your organization, different operating systems, and then you have the kind of, depending on how your environment looks, you have to handle that as a piece of ongoing kind of infrastructure. That's the way it works basically. So your infrastructure change, you have to understand how to handle it. From an NDR perspective, it's more about you don't, at least how we are doing it, we don't want to rely on an agent anywhere. We want to sit passively to collect a network telemetry. So basically through some specific points in the network, or through logs from different sources. So for example, in SaaS, we can collect that information and make sense of what we want to then extract. So that is called the metadata. So you basically pick and choose what you want to extract from the raw ongoing communication, and then that is fed into one central unit that has the AI algorithm, so machine learning and unsupervised, supervised, different techniques for the job to identify different behavior. So do I have a command and control? Do I have a file share information? Do I have a external remote access, which is a reverse shell? The communication needs as a reverse shell from inside outside. So those kind of things. And you want to build a notion of, from an on-prem to different environments, follow the attacker between these environments.
Yeah.
That's the kind of basic. So more a overall perspective rather than a very deep into the endpoint itself. But we, the aim is not, and this is if somebody's interested into understanding, hey, are you better than EDR or whatever? It's always, it depends on your choice, where you come from, what you have been trying to work with. That's always the case, right? I have a networking background, so I like this stuff because I think it makes sense to, have an overall. And I know the fact that, I like the fact that I say, yeah, you cannot delete the network data, because if you delete the network data, then you have a downtime and you have a business recovery that you have a much bigger solution to. And the aim of the attack today is to blend into the network, right? They don't want to be, it depends on the type of, but you want to kind of blend in and do the bad stuff before somebody actually recognizes you. So that, I think, goes good hand in hand, and especially this cross-cloud environments and on-prem stuff. So
Yeah, that sounds really good. I think like if anyone ever mixes up EDR NDR, it's the first letter of them should be, it's a pretty good giveaway. So EDR is endpoints detection and response. So your agent is on an endpoint, and your is, well, NDR is network detection and response. So you're listening to the network basically. I think that's good. And
yes,
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, so as you said, is one thing better than the other? Well, it depends on your environment and your budget and everything, as always. I mean, if you're maybe, and if I'm sort of generalizing a bit, if you're a Windows shop and you only have Windows servers and clients, then maybe like an EDR from Microsoft is good. But if you're an industry, you get a lot of OT stuff. You got machines and printers and stuff that can't actually have an agent on them, or most of them, then it's hard to monitor those. So that's, NDR might be much, much better, for example, or something. So yeah, depends on your own environment, I'd say. But it's a hard question for like which is better. And I like to say that I look at security as in layers, so as an onion, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, you need to have your firewalls, but they're not supposed to protect against everything. And then you have the next level of defense. You have multi-factor authentication. Then you have an EDR and an NDR and etc. etc. So you mean layer by layer. If you have enough layers, that should probably cover everything. Hopefully, we hope, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a good way of. I think the layered approach is something that is taught in the landscape of security, and I think that wells in. But I think one thing I want to challenge people with as well is to say that I've heard this with customers. We have actually customers talking about this, and I think it makes sense that if you look at the lens, I think you have discussed this in previously. What is a red team? The achievement that if you compare what the red team is and a external a adversary, right? Somebody who wants to do something bad that you don't know of, and you don't know their motives. That guy has all time in the world to subvert your protection points. This includes that if somebody clicks on a link and that adversary lands on the endpoint, they will have the time to use the techniques necessary to subvert that security mechanism that is there. And from that lens, that's the way I'm thinking. It is much harder to subvert an NDR than an EDR. And we have seen it as customer as well but you need an EDR to be surgical in terms of what is the process and finding out what is the solution. If you have, and usually most of the customer doesn't have, either or. They have, I would say both in some context, and they need some things to work together. So these are the things you need to think of, right? You have if things are subverted, if I'm, how do I manage that? What will actually see because if you put money in something that you think is the holy grail, is it the holy grail or not? And it's always the case. It's even case for us that if you are doing NDR, you need to have somebody actually looking if this is you cannot say the tool will do everything itself.
Yeah.
You need to decide if you want to lock down the account, or if you decide if the tool wants to lock down the account, then you need there is a decision made. And if there is gaps in the kind of where you would see the gaps, then is an interest for you to find those gaps and cover those. If there is no interest, there is a bad deployment. So that's always the case. And I see that often that people want to choose a technology because it's doing this or that, instead of, okay, let's choose a technology, let's work ourselves into building something that good. And obviously depends on if people are changing jobs and all of that stuff, but I think it's, and I think be pragmatic, and that's kind of my thought at least.
Yeah. So we got a question from chat, which is to you, Navid. It's Silica from chat. He asks, will a sensor-based NDR ever be available as a competitor to on-prem solutions?
Competitor to I don't understand that. Do you, Mikael?
No, I don't. I think we need
maybe a clarification. I'm trying to see.
Yeah, Silica, you need to step up your question game.
Yeah. Sorry for that. I don't like to, but I think if the question is kind of at the point where on-prem solution is preventive, so to speak, this is not a preventive solution. It's just
no hardware needed, he says.
Well, I mean, you can. So in fact, the ways that our technology, you can, for example, so this is not, this is where the industry is going. You can run this kind of stuff that we provide in the cloud as well. and the reason why you want to do it, and the reason why you need to have a platform that is portable, so meaning you can run it on-prem and you can run it in cloud, is to, if you have somebody says, no, it's more cost effective for us to do, you need to have the flexibility. So yes, that needs to be there.
Okay.
You need to have that capability.
Awesome. Thank you. See,
Yeah.
that's I read that question. I'm like, I hope you can answer it because I have no idea. So it's good.
Yeah. So if that was
Perfect.
the question, where do you run this stuff? And you can run it wherever you want. It doesn't,
Perfect. I
very,
hope that
very,
I hope that answers your question, Sulika. Otherwise, yeah,
yeah, you need to get back and
we got a thumbs up, so he's happy.
okay. Okay.
Perfect. Um, so I mean, obviously you're looking at network traffic and detecting based on that. But what sort of logs or log sources are you actually looking at, or are you tapping into somewhere? Like,
Yeah, so
specifically, or can be specific about like log sources and stuff.
yeah, so on I'm trying to look because it was one of the things I wanted to prepare, and it reminded myself that,
Yeah,
but
I have a bunch
from
of show notes as well, so that's good. That's
yeah. So let me talk about it. So from let's start with the network side, right? We look into the raw network traffic. So this means that everything, so all east-west traffic basically needs to be collected. And so what happens is that once the sensor is collecting that information, we send some metadata specifically. This metadata is things that the algorithm looks at, and it's kind of only a few % of what is collected. So if you the metadata that is sent from the sensor is 0.5% to 1% of what is collected from a network traffic perspective to the brain, and it's what provide you with that is either span configuration. So most of the customers know what span is used for troubleshooting, or if you have a network tap, a specific infrastructure doing that, you can use either or. And then what algorithms does is that they look at the network traffic. So this is important because this is how we are doing it a little bit differently. Once the algorithm, so the sensors are buffered, they have a rolling buffer where they collect things, right? Collect the raw network data. They send this to the metadata to the brain. Once the brain, as we call it, well, we have the algorithms, identifies attacker behavior, it goes back and gets a PCAP during the time where you saw the bad behavior with the information there. So you have that as well. So you have the raw PCAP and what is, the specific attribute. So if you have a command and control, we show you these are the it's multiple long TCP sessions to this outside domain. We show you the IP. We say that it has been going out for this amount of time. If it's an HTTP based thing, right, a detection, that makes sense to collect the PCAP and you see it inside, right, what is going on. And we can even do this so the PCAP doesn't make sense in the HTTPS side, but we can, without decrypting the traffic, identify a command and control channel over encrypted channel. So that is something that is unique to us, and this has particularly taken 5 years time to develop. So sorry for the long-winded question, but answer. But to your answer, so what we are looking into now, for example, from a log source perspective, for specifically Azure AD and Office 365, we look at activity feeds or read Office Management API. So we need to read the DLP Office Management API, the Graph API for Azure AD logs as well. So those are the things we are looking at. We are looking into expanding into, it is actually something that is going on right now into, I cannot share information about that, but expanding into other areas with other type of logs where we do the same thing. So basically You look at the logs, you collect what is important to you from a metadata standpoint, which is something that we do. You get that into brain. Once the brain sees and create a detection, we go back and get the logs or the PCAP for that specific time, have that raw information as well.
Yeah, so you buffer PCAP so you can go back and if there's an event, you have to buffer PCAP, right? So you can go back and see the full PCAP.
Exactly. So that is one thing we do. And then what we also do, so I know you talked about, we had a call before, we talked about the threat hunting, right? So I want to be actively looking for things. So what we do as well is that we take the metadata that we collect from the sources and we feed that into your own. So customer would have they call it data lake. It's like if you have a CM, you kind of push all the logs to a place where you have. So
like
and that is
Splunk or Elk or
yes.
something
So
like that.
whatever you can. So we have some so you push that into there, and it's based on Zeek Bro, which is a way. The reason why Zeek Bro, it's open source. It's a lightweight log format, which can give you the unique identifier for the connection. So it can actually, give you, when I have this connection, this flow, I know that it's I see the general session, which we call I sessions, all the traffic flow in and out through logs. I see that it's HTTP or HTTPS, and then I can drill into that type of flow based on, I know that there is a unique identifier, there is a hash for that session, so I know what's going on. So it's easier to, when you have a detection, you can then dive into the metadata as well to collect, for example, if you want to collect things for incidents, you can then look into the metadata during that time, or you can use it as a way of how do you say, the way what you describe, active threat hunting. You have some indicators of, and then you want to use. So, do I see any high privilege users in my environment being communicating to this domain? So this domain is something you have had in the past, but the high privilege users you don't have. And that is what we provide in the data. So we have our own attributes that we provide and say, hey guys, these are on. Beaconing is another one, how we define what is a beaconing command and control. So if you find something that is going on from a endpoint perspective, you can then look in, do I see any beaconing during that time? Or what if there was a beaconing to a potential command and control, who were actually doing it in my entire environment? Was there anybody else? Is there sitting any dormant communication that I haven't seen yet populating, contributing to a detection in the EDR that I can actually catch as fast as possible?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of things. I just want to talk and
please
so,
do. It's really interesting. Yeah, I have so many multiple threads coming out of your answer, so it's awesome. But we had a question from chat actually, So let's bring that up. It's from Sulika again. He says he's a bit He says, now that DNS over HTTPS is available for some odd reason, how would Vectra present DNS request data? Which is it makes it harder, at least, I would suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we are, if we want to look into, so if you look at what is the aim, right? If I answer that, the aim of us is not to look into how we see the DNS requests, is to identify if you have a command and control over an encrypted channel. So it doesn't matter if it's, what is the underlying protocol that is running. We know that there is another protocol running over HTTP or HTTPS that is used in a way where it is a command and control. And the way we do it is to use, in this specific case, just to give you an understanding why it's not understandable if you're not a data scientist. And it's that in this case, it's a time series data. It doesn't say anything, but I'm just throwing out what it time series data that we collect and feed into a neural net, and the result is, okay, I identify a command and control, which means somebody is, so imagine if you have a tool like Cobalt Strike, Meterpreter, you have a payload that is communicating to outside from inside, and the outside is giving it instructions with an interval that it goes and does, and then it gives, okay, I'm done. So this periodic communication is best solved with a neural net we have found over 5 years of research, which results in identifying a command and control. So that is a way of looking. And there are other things like how do you define, something that is more about anomalies in the network, where you would look into Kerberos machine authentication internally. And because one thing is that you collect. I want to, because sometimes the what I hear, and I was myself looking at it. Okay, do you detect this or that? Well, the notion of the platform is that there needs to be a progression of the attack. So what if you collect the command and control? Was there a reconnaissance after that? After the reconnaissance, was that in a way where somebody was actually, imagine if you don't know the environment, you are in that environment, you're doing things, you're not succeeding, so you are then using different techniques. So the algorithm goes into this, how does the attacker progress from there? So there are other things than what is the protocol, what is that, what is this? It's more the behavior. So another thing is about, for example, we tend to look at machine authentication data. Machine authentication data is through Kerberos, in our case. So with Kerberos traffic that we see, we try to understand what are the hosts in the environment, what are the accounts in the environment, where are those accounts used, what are the services those accounts are using, and then we give for each host a privilege score. So high privilege host, low privilege, based on what is going on in the environment. And if we see a mismatch from this, we trigger a privilege anomaly mismatch. This is very important if you have a command and control and then a privilege mismatch. And even as its own, it is important. But then you have to know the user that you see, the account. Does it belong to a service admin working on hour to solving a ticket in my environment from a host where he's working out, which we haven't seen before, which is actually somebody fixing somebody's, internal IT fix somebody's host laptop or, whatever computer? Or is it something, if it's a backup account, suddenly running in a high privilege host machine off hours, Thursday night or Friday night, then it's bad stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a long and good answer to the question.
So there's a lot of things. It's not just about protocols and what is used.
Yeah, exactly. So you aggregate stuff, and based on like a series of events, it might trigger less or more severe alarm, for example. We got another question in chat from Ricky B. He says, do you think that the attackers would be able to utilize machine learning to circumvent detection by NDRs?
Definitely, there's always, there is actually our CTO, and I, it's because of my own. If you are interested, there is a good talk on this from Oliver Tavaccoli, our CTO, where he walks through. I can send it out later. It is a 1 or 2 years where he actually walks through what is the, in the sense of AI, you have the protectors, you have the bad guys. This is where you go. So he goes into data pollution, where you can actually trigger. So you need to think of that when you're developing a such tool.
Yeah.
So it's important when you ask your, if you're evaluating system, do you have those controls in place? How are you working with that? Are you only using, and that is why we want to use a different technique. So if you're only anomaly-based shops, right, the adversary have an advantage. But if you use different techniques, it's much harder to contribute with something that screws, entirely up. And if you then put different mechanism, how you, as we talked about, progression, is this object oriented enough? Is there a progression? Is there a destruction mechanism going? What is the, based on what we see here, what could be a potential? Is it an insider? Is it a external adversary? Is it unwanted program that I don't want to neglect? So the different behaviors should actually give you different profiles as well. So it needs to be quite, to prevent these types of things, to prevent that you are not exposing yourself, with the hammer and the nail. That's the idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
So go broad. That's
Yeah. So that was one thing that I thought about earlier. That if you're only looking, not only, but if it was solely sort of predetermined or machine learning or behavior based, or do you also feed in other sort of external threat intel feeds, like known bad stuff, like known bad domains, known bad IP addresses and stuff?
Yeah, very good question. This is what we struggled in the beginning. What I saw is that some customer come and say, hey, I have an IPS or I have a threat intel. How can I feed that in? And then you have other customers that say, well, is it really machine learning if it's looking at signatures? Because that's definitely a signature, and we are not in the signature business, right? Yeah. We are focusing on the stuff that is not known. It's a behavior.
Yeah.
So that gave birth to the threat intel feed that is actually included in our product as well. And that can itself contribute to the score, because what people say with that, I want more context, right? I want to know if there is a command and control and there is a known bad, whatever, Cozy Bear or whatever that is attributed to Cozy Bear, and it's for me that is sitting in Scandinavia. I know that is something in the manufacturing that is, it kind of makes sense, right? Then you need to look at it. So, and it's more relevant to prioritize that in a sense. So I know I went into more deeps in the weeds, but it kind of understand you making the attribution, seeing based on your threat, your exposed threat, if that makes sense, then really important. But you can also take in your own sticks feed. As I see some of the customer, I talked to a customer today, I don't remember there's a consortium of, where these type of customers feed in their threat intelligence, which can be extracted by sticks files, and then they want to look at that as well, together with the machine learning stuff, and give more context. So.
Yeah, I like it. Layered security.
Yeah, exactly. You need
big fan.
You need to have. Yeah, definitely. It's the onion, right? You need to.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's a really good way to look at it. It's just there's no one thing will defeat everything else. It's just layer by layer by layer. Then, you should be pretty fine. One would hope. So, let's go back to the acronym. So NDR, right? What about the R in NDR? We spoke a lot of the D, right? The detection, how to detect stuff. What about the R stuff? What about the response? How do you mitigate or sort of mitigate stuff that you find?
Yeah, so the remediation and mitigation is more about, what we have seen is what do you have and how do you want to mitigate it. So there are some built-in functionalities where you can, through the kind of, if you see, so let's step one way back. The way we measure the attacker behaviors is not showing you individual. This is something that is way different than the mostly. We try to understand what are the entities and hosts in the environment. It can be your routers, switches, printers, your hosts, your laptops, and we look at the accounts as well. So these are the objects we look into. Each account and host has its own detections that we kind of look into progression and where in the kill chain they sit, if it's in command and control, if it's way down in the exfil, or if it's a ransomware activity. So that contributes to the scoring. So this is kind of the way we do it. And based on if you're looking into an account, you want to lock down that account for a certain amount of hours that you can define. So that's a built-in tool. If you use Active Directory, most of the our customers use that. You can surgically do that manually by the administrator from a, or you can set it to be done automatically based on different things that you choose. Based on if I see a high privilege account that is where where I see progression of attack that is contributing to the threat level and certainty of this, it doesn't say anything. But those are the kind of knobs we use to kind of be surgical with what we need to lock down. And then you can use the infrastructure to do the entity part as well. And the entity part can be, the host can be done through your network access control. So if you're using Cisco ICE, for that's just an example. If you're using Aruba has another type of solution for I don't remember, ClearPass, I think it's called, or something else. Maybe wrong here. Those can be integrated to do certain things through the REST API, based on tagging that we use, and also through the EDR integration, we can do the same. So we have lots of variety of built-in integration for I don't even remember. There are so many. So, but I can give you some name that are So you can do both basically, and it's more about it fitting into your infrastructure. That is one of the other keys that our solution provides. You cannot do TCP reset, right? Because if it's a UDP based command and control, how do you do a TCP reset, right? So
that's
so you need to think of the broadness of
Isn't it hard from like a vendor side to have solutions for all kinds of various solutions and stuff?
It's really hard, and if you think that you need to uphold that vision, and it's hard, right? If you want to do everything, it's hard. So it's better to look for what is there and do the best choice of, and it's not easy as well. I'm maybe oversimplifying things, but again, it's about willingness of doing stuff and willingness to take on the journey, because you need to be uncomfortable sometimes, right? And you need to start somewhere.
Makes sense. So I mean, you've been doing this for a while now. You must have seen and experienced some interesting stuff. So one of my favorite questions is about like war stories. So do you have anything that you can, and this is always a really hard question because in our line of work we have to really redact stuff because we don't want to drop sensitive stuff. So it's always like, I'm not sure how much I can say. But do you have anything you can share in terms of like events that you've seen or taken part of in the past when it comes to like discovering, stopping and mitigating stuff, and the real life stuff that you've seen?
Yeah, definitely. So I have seen some myself now at this point, and I've also seen from a company perspective where my colleagues, the likes of me, are talking to customers, and we have been very, now it's a more vendor type of, answer in this part, is that they have been actually talking about this externally as well. So, and it's the first time I'm in a situation where I see a customer actually talk about that this was the attack and this is how we actually caught it. So if we back on my own experience, I was involved in a incident where we were involved in the incident response side, and I won't go into the detail, I try to be very vague here, but we saw some critical hosts, as we call them, where we saw specific type of accounts that are used for infrastructure handling. I won't go say more. Those are used in order to do suspicious remote execution on specific machines, and that means that you're doing lateral movement. And from there, we found out that it was PSXX that was used, because you see this suspicious remote execution. You see that there is a create service A, which usually is something that PSXX contributes to start a service somewhere to do something, and it's a administrative tool. So you want to blend in, right? And that PCAP actually contained the we could attribute to the dropper that was used, and we could then go back and say, hey, these were the guys who were the possible, bad guys. I can't say more there even because I think, it's a very small community
Yeah,
here,
it is.
but and that then made them understand, how should we do the response here? What is the period of time we need to look into this? Because if it's so for example, if a ransomware, right? If you break down a ransomware, you need to know who you are, if somebody's after you, or if it says spray and pray things, they are moving on, or are they targeting you, which we see more and more. That is not the ransomware as a service stuff. It's more where they try, they don't succeed, and they move on. They target you. And if they target you, they will come back. So what is your mechanism that you have in place if they come back? So we use that to push so there are some executables that were used. We then look for continuously through the metadata logging service for who are accessing. Is there anybody accessing those executables seen in the environment? So a continuous rule where you can create yourself that makes sense in this environment, right? For
Yeah.
the use case. So that was kind of that was done during a week time period to kind of identify that. So, and then we have other I can share as well. So.
Yeah, please. I have some questions while we in between war stories. Uh, so it's basically a two-part question. So the first part is how like when you get if you get an NDR into a new environment, what's the like the learning time from deployment until you would say it's sort of fully functioning? Is
Yeah,
it
so
hours or days or weeks?
it depends. So the we have some folks that are using us partners, they say, but some are industry, I don't find the word, but partners that are using this actually for incident response. So in incident response, you have to have immediate answer.
Yeah.
So since we are using not only anomaly based, so anomaly based is unsupervised. This means that you have to learn, but we have things that are supervised in the so contributing to identifying the attacker behavior through massive amount of data that we have learned the brain, as we call it. So then it looks for those immediately. And there are overall, I don't know the exact, but we have 120, I think, plus algorithms. So it's not one or two. We have a wide set. And these are contributing, these are kind of spread out in a way where you could see command and control, file share enumeration, command, what's it called? C2, um, reconnaissance, lateral movement, exfil of data, and disruption of data, which is ransomware basically in those cases. So we put them down into these buckets, and there are a big portion of them that are both combined, so they don't need
Okay.
learning. But when I do a proof of concept, I usually say, that is not a incident engagement, right? It's just we want to make sure for all the algorithms to be 100% or good enough to be working. We say give it a week, and then some algorithms, then they will kind of continue to learn. And some of the continuous work is done always, right? Because you need to see if there is change and then relearn stuff as well. So that is also. But for incident response, we have. So for example, the command and control that I talked about over encrypted channel, that is something that you immediately get if you go in.
That's really cool. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I said it was a two-part question. The second part was, can you use this in an incident response, which you already answered.
Definitely.
So yes, cool. That's awesome. Because that's really nice to when you're in like a big incident. It's nice to have good tools or like services you can deploy and just use instantly.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I would say, what sorry, go on, Michael.
no, no,
I
go on.
just, so one of the things we are seeing now, for example, specifically incident response in Office 365, we said, during COVID, right? That particular place, Azure AD and, Office 365 is a massive hole right now. So there is no way. So if you have, the solutions are from different, I don't want to go into, vendors, but it's not based on detection. So again, the progression, if you have a suspicious sign on into the account, just forget about that. That account was taken over, like the SolarWinds attack, through a compromised software that then were taking over through account takeover, a local account, which was then used to pivot into Office 365, and then from there doing so. So if we take that away, because that's what we do basically, and that is the whole value of this, is that specifically in the Office 365, if you have a suspicious sign-on, you want to look for what happened later. Did I tamper with different techniques? Did I change attributes in that environment to be persistence,
Mm.
right? Did I use functions? If I have a administrative account, yeah, I think Trusa actually showed I don't know, one of your colleagues. I just remember that you did kind of a testing methodology, went through this, and that is the thing, right? You have different, some of the administrators in your environment, if those accounts are taken over, they might be tools that only they can use. So one example is e-discovery, for example. That is a tool that is used to collect information if there is a prosecution that you need to, and there is some data access to that. Those has been seen like a real scenario that you asked for. We have seen that has been used to create a search criteria, and then using Power Automate to, which is another tool that everybody has access to exfiltrate that data to an external entity.
Mm.
So this is a progression. If you see that, specifically, then you need to do something about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so those are the things that are important. It's not about suspicious sign-on from a IP that we haven't seen before. What did that lead to?
Yeah. So another sort of how to detect anomalies and behavior-based stuff. Can you, and I would suspect this is quite hard, but can you sort of tap into HR systems as well and to get data on like when people start, like a new account is created, and if they start it's supposed to being created and they will be seen in the environment, or people who work like on call and stuff, they might be doing stuff on odd hours. So that's sort of anomalies or behavior based. How do you
So
deal
so
with that like,
yeah,
challenge?
so there are, how do you say, if I break that, if I understand the question, so if you are using a specific, so for example, if you're using Azure AD, this is the way, we work with customers to identify how to best position this with limited resources and that. So it's from that, it needs to be pragmatic into the enterprise.
Mm.
So most of the enterprise uses some sort of, where consolidation of accounts. So mostly, and this is the way in order, it's Azure AD, where you have all the, so Office 365, you have Azure AD accounts, right? That's the thing there. So, and then they use single sign-on from there to pivot into other SaaS services like ServiceNow or HR service, from, if that is ServiceNow you're using, or if it's Workday or whatever that is. So we can see actually the account take over and what is going on from a account perspective. And we can see that it happened this time of the day. So lots of the intention of the tool is to be surgical on the time perspective.
Mm.
What was the time where we saw this? Was it right after? Was the command and control going on? So now I'm moving back to other stuff. Was this behavior, was the single sign-on seen on many occasions during that time? Were those accounts high privilege users? Looking for those, and this gives you the idea because you would see that in the tool. And then from there, you can actually create your own search criteria that could contribute to as custom models as well.
Mm.
So that you can create your own searches with what is. So if you imagine if you're sending the metadata to your own data lake, you can actually use that to create some other specific informational context that, hey, if these users are doing things offline, I want it to show me. If I have a SSH session to these segments during off hour or from this environment to this, I want to know this. So we have customers using that specifically as a. So yeah, sorry if I'm going back and forth, but yeah, that's kind of the way of.
Yeah, no, that follows my thought process is always back and forth all over the place,
Yeah, so
tentacles
yeah,
going
sorry,
everywhere. I like it. That's the way I work as well.
I hope it makes sense
No,
for people
it does.
listening. Yeah.
So, all right, let's go with something less technical then. So, I'm trying to figure out sort of where an NDR fits in. Like, say that you're a company and you want to invest in strengthening your security posture, right? And you're looking at other services to buy or products to buy. Like, where would an NDR fit in? Like, in what form of choice are you choosing between an EDR or NDR, or are you choosing between NDRs, or like where in the thought process sort of does an EDR fit in? If that does that make sense? The question.
Yeah, definitely
Okay,
it makes
good.
sense. So we have variety of yeah. I mean, we have variety of customers that are. I think the notion, and this is my own personal thoughts. It's not the companies, that it's my own. I think the problem we have currently is that again, you are seeing things from a budget. A budget is a budget decides that you need to do uh, a how do you say threat assessment. That then leads into, okay, these are the security controls we need to put in place. And then after we need to look at, okay, we need to do continuous evaluation. We do red teaming. The red teaming gives us a result. Based on that, we decide the technology, whoever shows the best result. Again, if you go back and think about, so this is really interesting stuff. Last week, there was a guy in Finland that I found, there is different blog, but this came out last week, that is blogging. So he has some interesting background, and I haven't actually confirmed it because I tried it on my Mac laptop. I downloaded Visual Studio to run this and try it, but he collected, surgically about different attack phases, looked into ransomware groups, how they were working, looked at MITRE, how their techniques were typed, kind of matched by MITRE techniques. He took that and then he created a code where you can download. He tried it out on different EDRs to show that, okay, if you want to have, because it's not about a red team anymore. It's showing that if the adversary have the time and willingness, they want to subvert the control points. And in this case, it's what is EDR. And you can maybe read yourself. I don't want to make the same, but it's really interesting what he finds out, and that is a nuanced way of looking at it. If you're just looking at a red team result, well, you know that the red team is tight on a budget, and they need to deliver. Those guys that they need to show something. That's it, right?
Yeah.
And based on that, you are taking a result. But if you think of who am I, the threat that you're opposing, if we know that the adversaries are getting surgical, what are the controls that you need to do? So it's a layered approach, and you need to think differently.
Yeah, makes sense. I haven't seen the write up. I need to look at it. It sounds really really interesting.
It's really, and there are a few of those, and I don't like to bash on, because I think we need the EDRs to do something, but I think if you have a high efficacy, you need a combination of things. But I think that it's not about NDR and EDR and CM, but if you have detection capabilities, you need to have a detection response capability. You need to start from somewhere, but it's not enough. You need to build the both worlds, because this is the way environment. And if you look at most of the companies, at least I talk to, they are going to the cloud, right?
Yeah.
So how do I make sure the journey is also including my detection and response, not only looking on-prem, but from a bigger. So start solving the problem, but look at it from a pragmatic. And it doesn't matter if you start with whatever, but it's a right way, I would say, right now. But you need to kind of look yours, and that shows you where you are vulnerable as well. If you
Yeah.
are working in a NDR or EDR, you would see where you're vulnerable, and you need to take the measures to instead of so for example, I say something that this is really yeah. So MFA, right? Some people talk about multi-factor authentication like it's the holy grail. Well, it's not.
Yeah.
It's one of the better things, right? But it shows in Office 365 that is exactly what is subverted, right? You're either you're changing things or you are taking over a token that you're using too. So, and then people are
Yeah.
suddenly, wow, can that happen? Well, yeah, that's the idea with detection and response. You need to know that everything is to be challenged every day.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do about it? What is the organization you are building? Who are you, you know, putting your hands into? If there is a third party, are they well positioned to do this? Are they continuously doing incident response engagement? Do they understand where the adversaries are going? So those are the things that are more important than, we need to try out this and that and compare.
Yeah, I like that approach. Like, don't just buy the latest, coolest thing. Actually, have
Yes.
a good thought process in this, and
Yeah.
make your investment worthwhile, and just make it, and then use it as well. I think too many people just buy something and
Yeah,
don't really use
definitely.
it.
And then it's better not to think about, because then that can backlash on you. Then people will say, why did you get that? We have done these investments.
Yeah.
And then the technology gets a bad reputation instead of, well, maybe we should have thought of, using the vendor itself to do the first period of time. They could actually help us, or use somebody, a reseller that knows this, that can do this, instead of just taking ourselves like it was.
Yeah.
So
I
if first period,
I,
those
al-
are the, yeah.
I also like the fact that you brought up MFA, and like we always, and I mean we as in security. I'll speak for all of us. I'll do that. But yeah, so we usually say that we really push for MFA, right? Like you need to enable MFA everywhere you can, and you should. That's like it's
Yeah,
such an
definitely.
easy step for a massive like fix basically. But then, as you say, people sort of assume that okay, so that's it then.
Yeah.
If I have MFA, my account is absolutely safe. Now, no, it's not really. It can be subverted. It can be technically, or I've seen cases where you just spam MFA prompts until people just approve them. Like,
Yeah, and
oh,
to
I'm
be
in a meeting.
honest,
I'm just I'll deal with this later and just approve.
and I mean, you have functions like, I guess everybody uses Office 365. You consent that you don't want a new MFA for 30 days, right? Or whatever, 15 days for this, application triggering, and you
Mm.
can choose that as well, in different, or if there is somebody who is trying to, how do you know if your IT is sending you an email saying, "Hey, go and install this application that we recently launched." So instead of getting a phishing email, you get an email that say, "Hey, go and install this. It's totally fine. You consent to it as well." So that consent is basically something else, right?
Yeah.
And so that is and it's again going back. What is my so you kind of I've lost the English word, but it's about assuming breach. It's
Yeah.
another mentality. It's not about prevention. I think many people unfortunately still have the journey to go into assuming breach, that you need to start something, understand your capabilities, filling those gaps, or having somebody who understands that, filling your gaps for you. And it's a continuous journey. So
Yeah. I love that approach as well. I think it's the old school way of thinking might have been, we'll build a big wall around this with firewalls
yeah.
and stuff, and then no one can get in. But nowadays, it seems like more and more companies are actually sort of approaching an assume breach scenario. Like, okay, let's just assume, and just to explain what we're talking about is, okay, let's assume that an attacker is already on the inside.
Yeah.
Because given, and as I see on a lot of places, like given enough time and resources, anyone can get in. I mean, if you're a nation state and you have
Yeah.
virtually unlimited resources, like you will get in. So that if you just relying on outer on the perimeter, then you're sort of screwed for. Yeah, you're screwed. Yeah, you need stuff to detect on the inside, like an NDR, for example. So I love that assume breach scenario. I always bring that up whenever I can.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, we are maybe a little bit nuanced as we. Sorry, we are not nuanced. We are working this, but I think it's something that is important. I agree with you, Michael. That it's more people that are leaning towards the other side that needs to kind of understand. Yeah,
Yeah,
take this into consideration.
yeah, exactly. And like just one thing isn't more.
Yeah,
One thing might not be more important than the other, but together, like
yeah.
as a whole, it will actually create a really really good like end product. That's what I like. Right, Navid. So we've sort of approached my one of my favorite parts of the show, which I've already warned you in advance. It's called
Yeah,
overrated, underrated. Um, so basically, what it means is I will just throw out some words or something topics, and then you will decide if you think they are underrated or overrated.
yeah.
Uh, it's non-controversial stuff. They're easy questions, but they're hard to answer. So,
Okay, let's
but
see.
and this is like
Okay.
just your own personal opinion. Like is this? I don't know. It's overrated. Um, so what about insider threats? Are those underrated or overrated?
I think it's underrated.
Yeah. How
Yeah,
come?
definitely. I think there are. It's something that is harder to understand, and if you're really good, you can. So it's. I think it's a mentality that needs to be learned by somebody who has seen that stuff more than what is if somebody like a bad kind of bad employee downloads stuff and then leaves the company. Those are the easy stuff, but then you have the harder stuff, and I think that is a little bit underrated. It seems to be you know too general, but I think it's more nuanced, and you need to understand more stuff. What is actually a insider? How long has that been going on, right? Because an insider also, if you're really, really, if you're an administrator and you're an insider, a rogue admin,
Yeah.
you know your stuff as well. It's totally different thing than if you have a user that doesn't know anything about IT. So
Yeah, I agree. It's also
that
interesting
is
to yeah. Uh, it's interesting to hear your take on it as well, because when I don't know if there's any official definition of what an insider threat is. So when for some people it's just if an attacker lands on the inside, that's an insider threat. So
okay.
the way I think about it, and you also is no, we also got bad
Yeah,
employees. We got employees making mistakes.
definitely.
Not intentional, just they make mistakes. They click on phishing emails. They do something, and then you have the horrible employees, which might work at a company and then they sell like data on the dark web or sell access on the dark web, like
And I will give you
continuously.
another.
Yeah,
I will give you
yeah,
another thing.
please do.
So this is what we are saying. What is an insider? Is it your partners that are continuously looking? If you have you know, a channel established from an IP tied to one of your partners,
Yeah.
should you? Because I've seen that they say, yeah, this is expected, even though it's 2 in the night. Is
Mm-hmm.
this really? There is somebody who needs to do the work, right?
Yep.
So those are the things that are important, and I think it's hard. It's not an easy task. I think we are like if it was, but I think you need to sometimes be and learning that journey and be part of that. That I think makes you aware.
Yeah, I agree. I
Sorry
think
for the long answer. I had to
it's good.
short. Yeah,
I'm the same. No, I agree with you. I think they're underrated. I think it's a risk that a lot of people actually miss out on sort of thinking about,
yeah,
because you're so heavily relying on other sort of external based threats basically. So yeah, I want to make a. I want to. I'd like to see a more official definition of insider threats.
Yeah,
What's an insider?
let's hope for that.
Um, what about alert fatigue? Is it overrated or underrated?
It's underrated, really underrated, because if you are, yeah, it's when this is so. I think that I'm representing. I see that always. I'm representing a vendor, so of course. But I mean, when you know that you are working, you have spent. So, when do you know? Well, when you have spent 3 hours looking into something and you don't know where you started, that is a.
Ooh, I think I lost you. This might be my Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, guys. This is probably my fault. Sorry, Navid, I lost you. Are you back?
Sorry, yeah,
I lost
yeah,
you. It's my Wi-Fi.
yeah.
I'm
I was
sorry.
just saying. No, it's okay. It's okay.
My Wi-Fi.
I have two kids playing. Yeah, their fair share of the network as well.
Yeah, let's blame them. That's
So,
perfect.
yeah. So yeah. I mean, again, it's about if you spend too much time and you see that, well, I didn't actually get any result. That is a typical sign that you have alert fatigue and you don't know where to start. So the question is, do you know where to start? Do you know what is prioritized of all the things you see? If the answer is yes, you're in the right spot. If the answer is no, if you're unsecure and don't want to admit it, that's also bad. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's the problem. That's where it hurts most. Do you admit, right?
Yeah. That's a really good thing to sort of talk about. 'Cause I try to, given I've worked in this for like 21 years ish, so I've sort of gone back and forth about along the lines of admitting when I'm wrong or not, or being mistaken and stuff. And I try to sort of teach people to, like, it's okay to not know. It's okay to make mistakes. I mean, just it's better to own up to your mistakes or that you don't know. I mean, the more I know, the more I ask. I ask
Yeah.
so many questions that I might not have done in the past because my thought process might have been like, I wonder what they'll think of me if I ask this question. They might think I don't know what I'm doing, and that's going to be embarrassing. So,
Yeah.
and no one else asks, so I'll just shut up and not ask because everyone else knows. But in fact, like in that room, there's like 8 other people who's like, I have no idea what this is. I don't want to ask because no one else asks, so I don't know. So I'm trying. I really want people to like embrace this. Just ask questions, and also because I've seen some people in the past in companies, like they just throw out a lot of buzzwords and big words, but they don't know what they're actually talking about. So if you question them and you ask, oh, so how does that actually work that you just said, and then they have no idea. So
Yeah.
you might actually find some big talkers who actually don't have no idea what they're doing. I've seen those through the years, so it's just ask questions. It's okay to not know. That's how you learn.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good way, and I think also it's the culture that you are, the company culture.
Yeah.
If you are working as a professional, you need to be a place, and I think this, unfortunately, depending on we all have our past. If you start in a place where it's okay to make mistakes, awesome.
Yeah.
If you're not, then you learn, and I think that it's yeah.
Yeah. And if you make a mistake, just own up to it and say, I made a mistake here. And then try to learn how not to do it again, of course, because that's how you learn. But I mean, everyone makes mistakes. Even people like you as a listener or viewer don't think ever make mistakes. They make mistakes. Trust me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel that all the time, and sometimes I had one guy telling me, hey, you cannot be prepared, because my problem is I always want to be prepared, right?
Ah, yeah.
In every situation. I have that but there was actually one guy in the past that told me he wanted to put me in a situation where I actually was not prepared,
Yeah, okay.
at all and that's the way to look at it, right? It's okay to not know, and it's okay to fail, and it kind of loosens up every end. And I think that's what these discussions are great. I think this gives people that, it's okay. All of us are different. And
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm a level 3 stock analyst and threat hunter, which is a pretty senior position. But like, if you would look at my browsing history, like the amount of Google searches I do is insane. I have to Google so much stuff. It's how it works. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, that's you're actually. I was actually surprised, when I started in this field, how much of the data that is available, and I think that is actually contributing to the thing that people are sharing. You get to know stuff and you understand stuff. So that is underrated as well. So Google is
True.
underrated.
Google is actually really underrated.
Get information, whatever. But let's see if the algorithms there will actually try to show, whatever.
Yeah. All right, we're actually down to 2 out of the 4 questions here in this segment. So next up is remote working. So being out of the office. Is that overrated or underrated?
It's underrated, man. I love it. I would say I would say so. I miss the part but in my work, and I think it depends, and the personality. I like to be active, right? Go out, and I can do lots of more activities. So I run. I told you, I usually run, and I feel happy about doing it. I did that. I wanted to do it, and that is hard for my job to cram it in. Going to different customers, and you can take things with you, but then then spend time with family. I have 2 kids, so that has been awesome. But I miss out, meeting customers, but from a family perspective, I think this has been great to me. At least
I'm the same.
Yeah.
I think it's overrated now because I'm getting fed up with it. I want to get back in the office. Like a year ago, it was like it's extremely underrated. If I could, I'd work from home all the time. Now I'm like, no, I want to get back in the office. I miss the colleagues and stuff.
Yeah, but I understand.
Some of them at least. The other ones are, I don't know. Now they're listening to this, so I can make fun of them. It's okay. All right, last question for this segment. Attribution in terms of attribution for threat actors who did something. Is that overrated or underrated? Do you need to know who did what?
Yeah, this is actually one of the toughest, because that actually exposes. I haven't worked so much with the attribution tied to C, so I cannot really be honest to myself. But I think, what I've sensed is that to some extent, so from the technology that we provide, it can be underrated, because when you have that capability, you can match that, what you talked about, you have threat intelligence that gives you that information tied to their tactics that have been seen in your region, how they operate. That is good. But then, how good is that information? How does that help you in a context of being overall better at responding? I think there are, I think it's a hard, tough question. And it's really, it's.
I think it's hard. Because
it's a really hard. It's really the hardest question to answer.
Yeah. I think if you get attribution wrong, if you attribute an attack to the wrong group, that can have some effects to it. But then if you get your attribution right, I mean, if you know that, let's say you've been, like, your company has been completely ransomware, right? And you have to pay the ransom, you have no backups, nothing. Or you have to pay the ransom. Like, if it's a ransomware as a service and you don't know who's behind it, like, you don't know if you can trust them. I'm doing air quotes for the pod later, but this is air quotes. You can trust them that you'll get your decryption key and you can get your data back. Like, you don't know if it's a ransomware as a service, but then if it's more of the, again, the air quotes, well-known ransomware groups, they might have a reputation of their decryption keys always works. So that's somewhere where attribution might be interesting. And then, of course, nation states is also interesting. I think it's more.
Yeah,
I think
but
it's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I think, what I was thinking, I think you're absolutely right what you're saying. I was more thinking about, so, the tendency is always that if you get something, if you get too much of something, you tend to, as person, might be start neglecting it.
Hmm.
And if that comes into play, how does that contribute to your, thought process of actually making it a serious thing where you have an insider versus, somebody's that early signs of this coming from outside and what should I do? And
Yeah.
yeah, those are, I think that was what I was, but you're absolutely right from the perspective of, if this is a spray and pray kind of thing, or if it's targeted to my industry, and that can help you really a lot.
Yeah.
But it's a
I think.
I'm learning still there. I think
Yeah,
that's
I think so. If there's any like law enforcement people looking at this, I'm sorry if I get this extremely wrong, but I think that's also the reason. Like if you look at law enforcement and they try to solve a case somewhere, let's say a murder, then they'll usually like name them as a suspect and not by name or he or she. They're like, oh, this is suspect, because if you sort of start to attribute it to something specific, then you sort of narrow down that road, and if you're wrong, you've missed a lot of other things. So that might be a trap that you fall into with attribution. Like you think this is a nation state from Russia or China, and then you just narrow down to that little scope, and then, oh, it wasn't, and then you actually missed stuff on the way. I'm sorry if that
yeah,
didn't
no,
make sense at all. It made sense in my head at least.
no. I mean, it's a good point. And another thing I was thinking of actually is that, so imagine if you're so, I talked to a customer here, but he said we have of 100,000 people inside working, we have 30,000 employees. The rest are external people.
Mm.
So how do you know if there is a compromise on the other end from a threat actor that is actually contributing to something yours? So that's also another way of thinking. Sometimes you don't have the information, right? So
Yeah.
if they're using the partner network to come into your network and do bad stuff, yeah, well, how do you protect you against that? And
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, that's where it can get wrong.
it's
So let's say you get
so
DDoS attack from, and all the IP addresses are from Russia. Like, yep, I'm going to attack from Russia. I'm like, no, there's probably a botnet belonging to stuff in Russia, but the owner of that botnet might be anywhere else in the world and not have anything to do with Russia at all.
yeah,
So yeah, if you attribute things too fast, I think you get stuff wrong. If it matters or not, I'm not sure.
definitely. So
Yeah, long answer to that little question.
yeah, we have more we can answer as well. I can throw out things like domain fronting. That is another thing that has been used. So that is exactly that. Do you know actually the IP where that is coming from? If there is so there are a lot of.
Yeah, exactly. If you whitelist something that is being domain fronted, then yep, you've whitelisted that stuff.
How do you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. How do you know? And it's I think that's one of the hard part working in a SOC. Like you look at stuff and you're like, yeah, this should be. It looks legit, and then it's actually like a domain front, so they're using a legitimate service or company at least, which looks fine by the looks of it. But yeah, that's why we're professionals. Like we do what we do, right? So alright, so do you have any other sort of war story that you've like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I have I actually prepared a few. So there was actually
Perfect.
one other thing we can try to see. So this is actually one of. So I don't know the ins and outs of this. This was something that shared internal with us. It actually tied to, a Office 365 type of attack. It's very simple, but it shows the way. And it was targeting. This one was targeting a mid-sized manufacturer, where we saw during a proof of concept actually. So, and usually this is nothing, but specifically during the year, we have seen these things, type of things. This is one of them, and where it was about kind of we saw multiple failed attempts, where somebody brute forced an account in Office 365 and then signed in. So a suspicious sign-on with different attributes tied to, location, what is it called? The method used, and also the user agent. And so these were different. And then this kind of led to, after 2 days, it led to this belonged to administrative mailbox, where they changed rules so they could forward specific type of emails. And then they had also some changing. So this, we call it risky exchange operations, where you also, besides the suspicious mail forwarding, they deleted email related to password or security.
Yeah.
So if there was a security password reset, they deleted that, sent to the. So that was something that was seen during the phase of time. And
I've seen like that specific thing, that setting forwarding rules on mailboxes. I've seen that a couple of times. So that's a really good takeaway from this. Like if you're in a position in your company where you can actually look at that stuff, like look at your mail forwards on all inboxes.
Yeah.
If they're going externally, like if your company policy is you're not allowed to forward any email externally, and you have that going to some random Gmail, just look into it. It might be something.
There was another occasion where we saw, for example, the same thing. Instead of doing that, so Power Automate has some specific, plugins to post things on Twitter, to post things on, HTTP connector, and then we saw, for example, Dropbox used to push data out based on a search in eDiscovery.
Nice.
So yeah, that's quite nice, handy.
So how do you why did that sort of trigger? Was it because of the amount or the size of the uploads, or was it that was the Dropbox, or?
Yeah, I don't know I think I can check it up for you, and maybe this is one of the things so there is, so Power Automate flow is created where we haven't seen that created on that account before in the extent where you have seen now. So that is one thing. And then you have the eDiscovery search is also tied to if there is, so it's anomaly based. Because you need to see, that is what I think, if I'm not, you may come back with this is a slight change of that, because I don't have the information now.
No,
so.
Yeah, and then that's the way that I like to think when I threat hunt, which is like a single specific event might not be something, another event might not be anything, but then if you add all these together, like, so these 8 events in the past 10 minutes, like that's actually something, because that together is an anomaly, but like one by themselves isn't really an issue. So yeah, that's that's a good point. So you add stuff together, and like if it adds up to stuff, then that's bad in the end.
Yeah, definitely. That I think is the you need to have that capability to also learn and take away the takeaways. I think the human mind is brilliant to see, the AI in here, I would say. So if you get that, then you tend to look for those patterns as well. So I think that is great if you have that capability. Then
my if there's anything that's it was hard to sort of talk about your own strengths, right? But if there's anything that I'm good at, it's seeing patterns and like anomalies with the human eye, basically. Like that's my thing. I love that stuff. Just like,
great.
No, this is different. Something is off here. It just feels wrong. I'm like, yep, there it is. I like that. That's my drug.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm working, and it's it's an interesting time as well, where we are at. A lot of things changing all the time. So I think it's really, really exciting to be part of the security operations type world as we see the change and
Yeah, 'cause it's
into customers moving into different environments, see the patterns there. What are they? I think that to me is really interesting. What is a progression of an attack in a container as a service environment? So that
yeah.
is what
I think it's moving
want to.
really fast. It's moving really fast in our business or in our area of the world. So if we
Yeah,
look back on this episode like 2 years from now, it's gonna be so different. Or like 5 years from now, it's gonna be like, what? Are you still using X and Y stuff? That's so bad. Like that's old school, boomer tech. Yeah.
yeah.
So
It's important to be on the front lines.
I had. I'm sort of ready to wrap up. I just had one question I forgot to ask, which came back when we're looking at. So let's say that. The question is basically about retention period, like how long should
Mm-hmm.
you or do you save your logs basically?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is then that if you find something, and the reason I ask is, if you find something today, you're like, oh, this has been going on for a while, or for how long? Oh, 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, and so what's your suggestion for retention period for these kinds of things?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and I think the way, and this is, I don't want it to come across, but I find this solution actually nice because rather than using a data lake, so if you know that bad guys are there, they want to stay, the really targeted attacks, right? They can go on for, we have different reports coming on. It was for several hundred days now. I think FireEye is talking about that. They have been, kind of
Yeah,
the father of that birth. And you have Verizon report, you have IBM talking about that, and you guys are talking. That is. But if you're looking into if it's driven from a compliance perspective, it's something else. And unfortunately, what I see that the gray line makes the customer, we don't know really, but we think it should be 13 months, or is it PCI DSS if it's 13 months? No, not really. So what is it then? Well, they cannot answer.
yeah,
So and is that is all the logs? Okay, so it's a cost. So what if you could send the detection logs
yeah,
to your data lake over 3 years time?
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
the chances are you are actually attributing back what is going on from that perspective. And if you have threat intel, that is there as well. It may not be the right data. And then maybe a pragmatic way would be, okay, what is a incident period for me, right? Is it 3 weeks? Is it, if I look at what is the definition of that? Is it, that is the rolling, how the active part when I'm actually digging for stuff that is good enough to know who are the guys, what was the deal, what is the, again, long-winded, but I think that I think is something that the customers are now looking at, and some of them, they are driven down this road because of huge cost of actually. So first they choose to push it locally. Well, it's hard to maintain that. Okay, off-prem, then you have all different. Then you kind of store that, and then the licenses and all of that. You go to open source. Okay, it's open source, but still a lot of data I have to pay for. Okay, I can, what is it called? You can archive that, so it might be cheap. But then, yeah, is it really
Yeah,
needed or
no, it's hard.
so?
I think retention period in any product is hard. Like how long should we save our stuff? Depends, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. It's a
Like
hard.
long enough, like if we're not talking about compliance, like long enough so we can detect stuff that you want to detect, however long that might be, and also so you, because it's expensive, like storage.
Yeah, yeah.
A long retention time equals a lot of storage, which is expensive in
And if the
the
answer
world.
was, towards us, I would say we, for example, in the solution itself, we usually take the detection logs or detections. They age out after a certain period, and it's not, white and say after this date, but usually amount 6-month period. But what we say, at least what I say to customers, that make sure that these detections are sent to a data lake. The amount of those are not, but then you don't have the real-time data, right? The real-time logs or Zeek logs, right? That we are contributing to, but it's at least it's the detection logs, right?
Yeah. So do you save your Zeek logs for 6 months, or?
We not the Zeek log. So all the detection. So imagine a command and control at this time happened. This is a log,
Yeah.
right? This is a detection, a file share enumeration, multi-home domain fronting, for example. That is a specific log, privilege anomaly. So these are saved for 6 months period, depending on the disk.
Yeah.
But you can, of course, if you're deployed in cloud, you can, the disk is larger, and if you need, you can always. But the metadata, that is the real-time metadata that the brain also generates for the actual, sessions. So DC, RPC, SSH sessions, HTTPS sessions, X509 certificates, RDP. Those are the real-time stuff. So the algorithm look into those specific metadata to find a bad behavior, but you have all the raw stuff. So
Nice.
yeah, we didn't have time to go through, but I mean that those are actually sent in real time as well. So imagine I have a PSX from one machine. Was there any delete service from that machine to any other machine? It's not a bad behavior, but it's a fact that I want to see if there was a delete of service from that machine during the same time that happened to other machines. That is something you dig out from the real-time Zeek logs, but that you don't have. You need to have the retention.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
so
cool. It's always good to go if you can go back and just look at stuff, especially in
yeah,
in
it's
an
always
incident. So like, yeah, you want to go back and find the initial point of entry of some sort.
yeah.
Cool, man. Is there anything else that you want to bring up that I forgot to talk about?
No, nothing else. My head. I'm. Yeah, I think I mean, I have had a lot of interesting stuff that you mentioned that we talked about. So no, I don't feel that. Yeah, I think we talked about. Of course, there's always a lot of things we can talk about, and
Yeah, because
maybe
that's the thing when
yeah,
you like if you're talking about something that you're passionate about. I mean, there's not really any end to it.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff. Again, I think I'm looking forward to more, look into the cloud stuff, where we see native cloud native services. So as the DevOps type of work. So the developers are using on-prem services like OpenShift to kind of deploy the server, but all of those will lead into cloud. So you're pushing your Kubernetes containers or workloads into the cloud and stuff, and then either you choose Google or AWS or Azure container services, or you go directly to function as a service. How does that come into play? And does and this is really interesting, if you look into cloud, if you have a cloud, I don't know, CSPM, I think, cloud posture management. So is it enough to understand the wrongly, so what is wrong, misconfigurations? Is that enough? Or do you actually need to identify the bad behaviors?
Mm.
So I think that's something that is bubbling up, and I'm really interested to kind of, because again, it's about, we have the industry that thinks that, well, prevention, right? You can just tick your box away from this. You can say, yeah, we don't have that vulnerability. It's okay now. Well, today, yes, but tomorrow it's not. So
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you encounter zero days and stuff. I mean, if you have a vulnerability, you can just patch it, and
Yeah.
preferably sooner than later. But then, as we've seen with the Microsoft Exchange, the Hafnium incident,
Yeah.
like a couple of months ago, I mean, it's 0 days. You can't really patch 0 days because it's a 0 day, and by definition, you don't know about it. So, but yeah, I think those are really, really good times where you need something that looks at behavior and anomalies and stuff. That's
Yeah, definitely. And the unknown, I would say. It was one of the there is a video on it. I think you have seen it. It was one of the, I think it was, yeah, I don't remember. It was a person in US working with, yeah, never mind. It was really interesting. He talked about, known knowns, known unknown, and then the unknown, which
yeah.
is basically what you need to focus on. That is, yeah.
That's hard to spot with if you're signature based.
Exactly. So.
All right, cool, Matt. Thanks so much for joining. It's been really, really interesting. I've got to know.
Thank you, Mikael, to be part of this. I'm glad that you asked, and yeah, thanks for that. I hope it contributed something at least. So.
It did. It did to me. I had a lot of questions that I personally want answers to. So for me, it made sense. For me, it was really, really interesting to learn more about this. So that's really good.
Awesome.
Right, and thanks to everyone in chat and who listened to this as well. So until next time, we'll talk to you later, guys. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Inside security.